In the next 12 minutes, you're going to go from knowing nothing about Photoshop to having a solid understanding of how it's laid out and how to use the main tools. So let's get started. So we start out by opening up Photoshop. This is the window that's going to open at first. In the middle, you have your recent projects. We're going to just click on Create New. And then I get this pop-up. This allows me to choose my canvas size. So you can select whether you want it by pixels, inches, a few other measurements. I'm going to set mine as 2000 pixels by 2000 pixels. And this is what it looks like if you're creating a blank canvas to be drawing on or do that type of creative project. If all that you're doing is editing an image, then it's going to automatically create a canvas for you, the same resolution as your image. So we're going to go ahead and click Create. And this is what Photoshop looks like when you first open it. So here in the middle, we have our blank canvas. On the left side, we have our toolbar with all of our main tools. Up at the top, we have our menu where we have our different adjustments and filters that we can put onto our photo or our drawing. And then on the bottom right, we have our layers tab. Now I know that none of that makes sense, but we're going to go over each section and explain what it all means and how it all works together. So let's go ahead and start out with the layers section. For the layers section, if you kind of think of it as you're drawing on a piece of paper, that's what your main canvas looks like. You're looking straight down onto the paper, and that's how you normally draw on it. But if we have a stack of papers, you're actually having layers, and the image that you're seeing is the layer on the very top. So let me explain this better by actually creating a few more layers here so that you can see what's happening. Over here, I have my shape tool. I'm going to go ahead and start out with a rectangle, and I'm going to just draw it. And what you see happen is a new layer just appeared over here on my layers tab, and it's of the rectangle. So it named it for me and everything. So now I'm going to right click on my shapes, and I'm going to come down to my ellipse tool. And instead of our rectangle, we're going to draw an ellipse. And you see this little black fill option right here. I can click on this and choose my color. So now my ellipse is red. And what you're going to notice is down in our layers tab, we have our background on the bottom, then the rectangle that's black, and then the ellipse that's red. And what you'll notice is that the ellipse is over the top of the black rectangle, which is over the top of our background. And you can see that over here. The ellipse is over the rectangle, which is over the background. So that could be confusing, but I promise it's really simple. And if it hasn't clicked for you yet, just rewatch this part, and I promise it's going to make a lot of sense. So now that you understand what the layers are, how it's stacked, and how that correlates with your canvas and how the layers on here are stacked, I'm going to show you why this is so important. It's because you can edit each layer individually. So if I wanted to, I could click this little eyeball icon, and what happens is it makes that layer invisible over on my canvas, and I can bring it back, and I can make the rectangle invisible. I could also make the background invisible, and the background right now can't be edited because there's a lock on it. But I could turn that lock off, and that allows me to edit the background. I'm going to explain what all of that means now. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's say that I want to make some adjustments to my background layer. It's the one on the very bottom right here. So I could come up, let's say, to Image, Adjustments, and I could do Brightness and Contrast. I could do my curves, my vibrance. I've got a bunch of options right here. We're going to just start out with Brightness and Contrast, and it's going to give me this pop-up here. Now within this, I can bring my brightness down, bring it up, change my contrast. You're not going to see a whole lot because I'm adjusting a plain white layer. But something you will notice is if I come over to my brush tool, which is this one here, you'll see at the very top, these are all my options for the brush. So I can see that the size of my brush is 120 pixels. I could make my brush larger, or I could make my brush a lot smaller. And so you can see this is my brush size. If instead of 40, I come up to, let's say 108, you can see the brush size is now a lot larger. I can also change the hardness. So if I leave the brush size the same, but change the hardness and draw again, you'll notice it's got a really sharp line on the edge, where before it had a very blurred outline. It was a lot more soft, where this is a lot more hard. So you can quickly make a lot of changes to your brush right here. And if I want to change the color of my brush, that's going to be with this option right here. So whatever color is selected in this box that's on the top is the color that my brush is going to be. So I could come down to the blues and choose like this shade of it, hit OK. And now when I draw with my brush, it's going to be blue. Something that you're going to notice though is if I draw over the ellipse, you're not seeing it, and over the rectangle, you're not seeing it. And that's because I'm only drawing on this very bottom layer here. But I could bring this layer up to the top and you can see everything that I drew, but you no longer see the ellipse or the rectangle, and that's because the background is on the very top. If I turn that background layer off by clicking the little eye, then you can now see what's below it or behind it. I feel like you now have a very solid understanding of how the layers work and how you can change the order of the layers to choose what appears on the top. The final step of this little art piece right here would be saving it. So to do that, I can do File, Save As, and this box pops up, which allows me to choose the name that I want to save my art as well as the file type. I'm going to save it as JPEG, which is a really common file type. If I wanted to save all my layers, I could save it as a PSD file, which only opens up in Photoshop, or I could save it as a PNG if I wanted to save it with an invisible background. But for now, let's keep it simple and just save it as a JPEG. And we are now finished creating our custom art project in Photoshop. However, that was very basic, so let's go ahead and do something that would be a lot more useful and interesting. We're now going to do something that makes a little more sense. We're going to take this photo that's of a person on a beach and drag it onto our canvas. And you'll notice this little icon around the photo. That makes it so that you can scale it up or down. It also allows you to rotate it and do a few other options depending on what the icon is around the image. When you're happy with it, you can just click on Enter. And I just realized this person is not on a beach. This person is always on their iPad. And that's definitely what's going on right here. So let's select them on their iPad and then them on the beach. And let's place this person on a beach. That would make a lot more sense. So I'm going to scale up the image of the beach to match our canvas. Yeah, we'll do it like that. We'll bring it up to about here and then hit Enter. And now we're going to scale up the person on the beach. Move it, let's say to about here and hit Enter. And now for the hard part, we need to remove the background, all of this gray, so that it looks like this person is actually on the beach. Now to do so, all we have to do is come over to Remove Background, and with one click, you can see it's thinking, and the background is now removed. So you now know how to load multiple images into Photoshop, how to stack them using the layers, and then how to remove the background. Let's do something a little bit more complicated. We're going to drag another image onto our canvas, and let's really scale this one up. And I'm going to put it about here and hit Enter. And I definitely remember there was no one else on the beach. So over here, you can see it's called the Spot Healing Brush. That's what it started out as, but now if you right click, there's actually a lot of options within it that are all slightly different. But we're gonna go ahead and just use the Spot Healing Brush. And I can see, oh, first I've got to rasterize this layer. I'm just gonna click on it and it's gonna give me a pop-up saying I need to rasterize it and hit OK. But had it not given me that pop-up, I could have come over, right-clicked, and done rasterize layer, and that just changes the file type, which makes it more editable within Photoshop. But these people right here, they weren't there. And these people in the water, they weren't there. And these people here, they weren't there. It was definitely just me on the beach. And that quickly, you can clean things up and make it look like there was no one else on the beach. So that's just using the Spot Healing Brush. And that similarly, I could come over here and make the beach layer invisible, which is going to show me the layers below, which is this person who I just realized I was going to show you how to remove blemishes from their face, but that's not really a problem. So what can we do instead? I guess we could just remove an eye, but that's not very helpful. However, if there were blemishes, you could definitely remove the blemishes using that tool. I'm going to show you up here on the very top. You can see just like I can change my brush size, I can change the size for my Spot Healing Brush as well. So if I wanted to do something smaller or more fine-tuned, like just an eyebrow, you could do that. Ideally, it would be like if there was pimples or something like that, you could clean up the skin. But for now, I think this shows what that tool could be used for. So you now have a solid understanding of how layers work in Photoshop, how to import images, how to save the images, and how to not just to use the spot healing brush to remove objects or pimples or whatever it might be, but how to actually do composites and put layers together and combine layers. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much you can do in Photoshop, but I can't teach it all in 12 minutes. So make sure to check out our other videos.